The year is 2005. Xbox 360 is officially released by Microsoft as a successor to the original Xbox. The video sharing website called YouTube is founded, and twins Steven and Robert Hewitt form Bruno. For over a decade, the duo used the namesake to upload games, videos, and sprite art to various websites. One fateful day, Steven was browsing the Spriters resource when something caught his eye. A custom sprite sheet by sprite artist Flair of Mario with his trusty water-pack Flood. It was at this moment that Bruno had an epiphany, a Super Mario Sunshine game but in the style of 2D Mario. Soon after, Bruno got to work on their first prototype, Super Mario Sunshine 64. As the title suggests, it featured many elements from Super Mario Sunshine, but also from Super Mario 64. After a few demos on Newgrounds, SMS64 came out on June 6, 2006. Let's just say the game wasn't the best it could have been, but given that it was their first game and it was 2006, we can't really blame them for it. Despite its flaws, the game received a lot of support from the Newgrounds community. It was around this time that Flash games as a whole reached a peak in popularity. This motivated the Bruno brothers to start working on a sequel, which was originally called Super Mario Sunshine 128, but was later renamed to the game we know and love today, Super Mario 63. After 3 years of work, the game was finally released on the 10th of June 2009 on Newgrounds and Cheesy Art, and people around the world rushed in to do their first playthroughs of the game. Super Mario 63 took the best ideas from multiple Mario games. It took inspiration from Super Mario Galaxy with the introduction of Slink Stars and the music, as well as from Super Mario 64 with the course design. This time around they clearly put more effort into movement, giving the player many more options such as diving, double and triple jumping, ground pounding, spinning, all without even taking into account the floods that were added. The game has 64 shines, 64 star coins, and 3 Bowser keys that can be collected. However, players would soon discover that Bruno intentionally left a few secrets that could change the game entirely. Normally, to enter the first Bowser stage, you need to collect 8 shines, which would unlock the door behind the level. However, it was found that if you go into a room and triple jump at a wall, there is a line of blocks that's not solid, letting you go through them and enter the first Bowser stage with no shines at all. A user posted a comment on Newgrounds explaining the shortcut, to which Bruno replied saying that it was possible to beat the game with just 1 shine. This got people very excited. Another shortcut in the first Bowser stage was found where you could use an invisible warp pipe to send you straight into the fight, without having to climb up to the top. While these shortcuts were nice and all, in the end, you still had to collect 32 shines to walk up the endless staircase. Until finally, a new shortcut was found which skipped the staircase entirely. By collecting Rocket in a secret area in the castle, and then rocketing to the sun above the main hall, you will reach the Slink Star leading to Bowser 3. This was huge. The game could now be beaten right after collecting the Tutorial 2 shine, which was required to unlock Rocket and Turbo. And so, the Any Percent category was formed, which marked the beginning of a new era, the speedrunning era.
Yes! Yes! Screw off! I don't care if I get bad RNG! I can still do it! That's right! It's over!
For the first few years after the game's release, there were no public reports of people doing speedruns. So, our journey begins back in late 2010, when on November 12th, a user by the name of I Have No Name created a forum thread for Super Mario 63 on Speed Demos Archive. In that thread, he posted a custom level that he made, but a few hours later, he would make a second post, claiming to have beaten the game in around 1 hour and 15 minutes. We aren't sure whether this was the world record or not, but this is the earliest mention of a completed run that we could find on the internet. While this one doesn't have video proof, it is believed to be a legitimate claim, as he would go on to get many world records in other categories with recorded runs. Just a month later though, on December 21st, another user by the name Hackjack posted that they managed to beat the game in 41 minutes and 23 seconds. How was he able to nearly cut the run in half? Well, based on the following posts he would make, it looks like I Have No Name hadn't been aware of all the shortcuts when performing the 115. This means that he most likely completed the game with more than 10 shines, whereas Hackjack only collected 1. Unfortunately, as it was common for new speed games at the time, the first few runs of this game don't have surviving video proof. We would have loved to analyze them and show the strategies used, but sadly, we can't do that for now. Around this time, the desire to create a segmented run picked up, and a few users would chat back and forth about possible optimizations. In January of the following year, I Have No Name made a new forum post. 13 minutes so far on the run. I've been a minute ahead on a single segment run, and was deathless through the final area. While this is a very vague post, after speaking with I Have No Name himself, we can estimate that the segmented run likely ended at some point in Bowser's Castle before the space section, and the single segment run may have finished somewhere around the 18 to 20 minute range. After this, it appears the activity died down. 2011 and 2012 came and went with no new posts. But on March 26, 2013, I Have No Name broke the silence by making a new thread in which he would post about having gotten a 1459 all the way back in July 2012, also with no video proof. Fortunately, in the same forum post, he would finally link the first any percent run with video, a personal best of 13 minutes and 31 seconds. Let's see how he did it. The game starts off with an introductory part named Tutorial 1, where timing starts as soon as he presses Z to read the first sign. Here, the game tries to teach you the basics, such as moving around and defeating enemies. Already from the first room, however, I Have No Name showcases the usefulness of diving. Diving grants Mario more speed than simply walking, so he tried to make use of that as much as he could throughout the run. Tutorial 1 also introduces FLUDs into the mix, namely Hover FLUD, letting I Have No Name simply hover over the lake here. In the fourth and final room, he uses a precise double jump off the spinning platforms to skip part of the room, reaching the pipe way earlier. After finishing Tutorial 1, I Have No Name enters the castle, ignores the toad, and instead does the shortcut we mentioned to reach Bowser 1 early. Once in the Bowser stage, he waits for the moving platform at the bottom so that he can land on it to use the invisible warp pipe to enter the Bowser fight. Here, he simply flings Bowser 3 times, defeats him and gets the key, which takes him to the second tutorial stage named Tutorial 2, where the other 2 FLUDs are introduced. In the first room, I Have No Name collects the Turbo FLUD, which will be used to move much quicker, both on land and underwater. He unlocks the blue platform by pressing the 2 switches in the lake, and then turbos to the end of the room. The second room is a climb to the top to reach the shine. He uses the rocket nozzle here to skip some of the platforms to the left, and then collects the shine, which takes him back to the castle grounds. Next, he traverses through a secret passage to reach a room containing rocket and turbo nozzles, which he will utilize to reach Bowser 3 early. With this skip, he also gets to keep the nozzles once in the Bowser stage. This is the longest single section of the run, featuring a lot of vast, open spaces. Here, it is good to use the rocket nozzle and a lot of spinning, which is what I Have No Name does. Eventually, he gets to the huge rooms. These 2 rooms are long, continuous sections of tight movement through corridors, small platforms and falling blocks, and are therefore known for having a particularly high skill ceiling. I Have No Name's movement here is not very flashy, however, it is quite effective. At the end of Huge Room 2, he also does the first real trick of the run, zipping. If you let the moving platform squish Mario into the ceiling, the game's solution to get you out is to push Mario to the left until it finds a valid position, which happens to be right in front of the door at the end, saving about 5 seconds by skipping the other moving platform. This trick was actually discovered by himself by accident during a Twitch stream from 2011.
Stay in the wall and then you're at the door. unbelievable that actually works.
I Have No Name now enters the fake Bowser fight. This fight always follows the same pattern, which means he doesn't have much trouble with it. I Have No Name carefully dodges Bowser's fireballs, stomps on his head 3 times, finishes the fight, and takes the Sling Star into space. You lose rocket and turbo nozzles in space, which means he's only got hover left. He makes it past the 3 rooms of space, mostly by just jumping and hovering around, although he did do a little cut in space too, skipping the ice section. Next up comes the true Bowser fight, where he tosses Bowser 3 times into the bombs to finish him for good. Now it's off to the final part of the run, the escape from Bowser's castle. In Escape, he loses all floods, which makes it the hardest part of the run. In these 3 rooms, almost everything is falling, rotating, and overall crumbling. And there's also a death plane slowly moving across the screen. All I Have No Name wants now is to finish the run, so he mostly plays it safe. Unfortunately, he still dies 3 times. Once in the second room and twice in the last room. But eventually, he makes it to the Sling Star and completes the game in just 13 minutes and 31 seconds. This was the first world record run with video proof that we know of, and while it was a solid enough run for the time, it had its fair share of slowdowns. The most obvious one being that he didn't pick up turbo at all going into Bowser Free. There were also a considerable number of slowdowns in space, such as missing the double jump in Space 2 to reach the Sling Star, slowly moving through Space 3, getting slow throws on True Bowser, and of course, the 3 deaths in Escape contributed to the time loss. But it was a start. He then moved on to other categories, such as no major skips, where every major skip seen in the Any Percent run was forbidden. After having conquered that category, I Have No Name came back to Any Percent and posted that he beat his own time twice in late May, with the record sitting at 12:17 by the end of the month. However, they don't have surviving video, so all we have are some screenshots. A few more months would pass, and I Have No Name would submit another run on the 7th of July 2013, this time with video, and 11:32. The start of the run was similar to his 13:31, the only difference being that in Room 4 of Tutorial 1, he used a bird and jumped off of that to reach the pipe, which is still used to this day. Tutorial 2 Room 1 featured sloppy gameplay, but that was accounted for in the second room, where he blasted through the platforms and enemies. This is a good time to talk about one of the most important tricks in Super Mario 63, air rockets. See this red bar? That is called the nozzle energy, and all 3 floods function because of it. The rocket nozzle drains the entire bar with one use, and only works when this meter is full. Luckily for us, the nozzle energy gets fully replenished as soon as you touch the ground. Therefore, we are able to keep rocketing by passing through semi-solid platforms, because the game considers us to be standing on them for one single frame while ascending upwards. With some slightly faster castle movement, he gets through to Bowser Free. The most notable mistake, which could be considered a blessing in disguise, is that in this room, called Turbo Room, he missed the double jump rocket the first time, which meant he fell down to the turbo nozzle and picked it up. It drastically sped up the room, however he stopped using it in the following rooms and just stuck to rocket and hover. The gameplay in huge rooms was smoother this time around, and he managed to get the zip without Mario being squished. In the fake Bowser fight, instead of staying away from Bowser and letting him shoot fireballs, I Have No Name stood under Bowser, which made him ground pound instead, saving a couple seconds throughout the fight. He cleaned up the missed double jump at Space 2, and Space 3 went a little better, but those time saves would pale in comparison to what was about to happen in Escape, where he truly pulls ahead. Zero deaths. That's right, this is the first deathless Any Percent run that we know of, an impressive feat for the time, and after entering the Sling Star, the run concluded with a time of 11 minutes and 32 seconds. This one really showed the potential that a no-death run had, and as the weeks passed, it seemed like it could be the one to stand for years to come. But only a few months later, someone managed to top I Have No Name. Except it wasn't by 5 seconds, or 10, or 20, but by nearly a minute, performed by South Korean runner Siri Minho. How did he do it? Well, the time save didn't come from one place in particular, but rather from smaller time saves throughout the entire run. In Tutorial 1 Room 2, Siri Minho double jumps and spins instead of triple jumping to reach the hill, which is used to this day. He dives even more than I Have No Name to go faster, as well as using dives combined with the hover nozzle, finishing the first tutorial in under 45 seconds. In the Bowser fight, instead of ground pounding at the start, he spins twice to get right behind Bowser's tail, so that he could grab him right away. He also used one spin for each Bowser throw, whereas I Have No Name used an extra spin for the second throw, saving a little bit of time. Tutorial 2 was a little bit slower. However, where he really manages to pull ahead is Bowser 3. Unlike I Have No Name, Siri Minho also grabs the turbo nozzle from the castle, which he is going to use wherever he can. He almost takes a death in Heat Room 1 and Heat Room 2, but manages to barely avoid death and enter Fake Bowser. Before entering Fake Bowser though, he rockets through the door from the left side instead of going to the right side, which saves a few seconds over I Have No Name. Fake Bowser was pretty much the same, however he was able to stomp on Bowser way earlier each time. The late game was of similar quality to I Have No Name, letting him keep the lead and snatch the record with a 10:41. South Korea was now on top of the 80% category. I Have No Name had been beaten. But unfortunately, these would be the last ones we would ever see from either of them. This was the end of the first generation. If anyone wanted to see this game be pushed further, we would need some new faces to step up. But with the record having so few mistakes and so many small optimizations, it was not going to be easy. Luckily, the new runners would get a little bit of help. 80% was about to look completely different.
Normally, you would have to defeat the first Bowser, collect his key, and complete Tutorial 2 in order to get back into the castle and have rocket and turbo nozzles unlocked. Around this time though, it was discovered that Tutorial 2 is not actually required. The floods are unlocked when you collect the Bowser key. However, Tutorial 2 is a stage that you can't exit out of. The only way out is to get the shine or quit the game. It was already known that by losing all your lives, you would game over and be sent back into the castle grounds. But there's a catch. If you don't have any shines, you don't have the life counter, and you could die infinitely. The only shine that was picked up in the run was the Tutorial 2 shine. So how would you unlock the life counter? Well, Eddie gives a shine, so you could go to his room and collect it. It all came together to form a new route, called T2 Skip. It would take a few months, but in March 2014, a new player coming from France by the name of Sekanor achieved his very first world record of 10:30. In his run, Sekanor collected the Eddie Shine, defeated the first Bowser, and by dying 5 times into the pit at the start of Tutorial 2, he was sent back to the castle grounds with the nozzles unlocked. This saved about 10 seconds, and this route would become the new meta for speedruns, and most players still use it to this day. Sekanor also used the turbo nozzle more often, but he had some slip-ups here and there. Overall, considering it was his first submitted run, it was a solid run, but it could have been better. The T2 skip route definitely had a lot of potential, and so he kept doing attempts. He would post a few runs that broke the record during the last few days of April and the start of May, ending off the spree with a 10:10. The video proof of these runs has been lost, but even without any footage, Sekanor's goal was clear. He wanted to be the first person to beat Super Mario 63 in under 10 minutes. And sure enough, on May 15, 2014, equipped with speedrunning's greatest weapon, a recorded video, Sekanor broke through with a 9:54. The start of the run was already getting fairly optimized, with Tutorial 1 being done in just under 40 seconds. Between his 10:30 and this run, he discovered that it's faster to do 4 deaths right at the beginning of Bowser 1, then defeat Bowser and only die once in Tutorial 2. Bowser 3 went well with good usage of the turbo nozzle, and Fake Bowsery cleaned up the slow stomps and moved on to Space. Space was pretty nice for Sekanor. He had a clean Room 2 and a solid Room 3. He didn't miss any throws on True Bowser, and in Escape he was able to save time in every room, while barely avoiding death in the last room. All in all, this was a very good run for the time, and Sekanor moved on to other categories for now, leaving 80% behind. But only a month later, on the morning of June 13th, he woke up to see that his 80% record had been beaten. Someone had posted a 9:44, a run 10 seconds faster than Sekanor. He goes by the name of Doomeeper Ninja. Unfortunately, the video of the run seems to be gone, so we can't analyze it, but it's most likely legitimate, as Ninja would go on to take several IL records with video proof. This run would stay on top of the leaderboards for a little while, until Sekanor came back to any percent to reclaim his lost world record. He would get a personal best of 9:49, and then tie the record with a 9:44 of his own on August 29th. However, if we look at the description, Sekanor states, "Hover only world record." What is that supposed to mean? Hover only refers to a new route crafted by a runner known as Froggy Fro, which involves completely skipping Bowser 1 and Tutorial 2, and aims to enter Bowser 3 as soon as possible, completing the rest of the run with just the hover nozzle. Luckily, we wouldn't have to wait long to see the full potential of this new route, because only a month later, on September 20th, 2014, Sekanor would get this run. Sekanor begins the run by collecting the two fastest shines, Eddie and Secret of the Mushroom, in order to unlock the door leading to Shifting Sandland. After going through it and using a secret passage on the left, he grabs Hover and goes straight to Bowser 3, entering the Sling Star in under 1 minute 50. His first few rooms were very good for only having Hover Nozzle, and he barely lost any time in Huge Room 1 and 2. The stomps on fake Bowser could have been faster, but even still, he golded the split by 7 seconds and was over 18 seconds ahead of his 9:44. And the time saves didn't stop there. Space 1 and Space 3 went alright, but he was really fast in Space 2, and his Bowser throws were clean. Going into Escape, he was already 19 seconds ahead, to which he added 6 more seconds of time save using riskier strats to finish off one of the best runs up until that point. 9 minutes and 19 seconds is all it took Sekanor to beat the game. He didn't just break the 9-minute 30 barrier, he absolutely smashed it. Everyone agreed it was the God Run, even Sekanor himself. And just like I Have No Name's 11:32, this run seems like it was going to stay on top for a very long time. But for the second time, something would happen that wouldn't let it stay. Except only this time, it wasn't a new runner beating the record, it was a new glitch that would forever change how speedrunners played the game. Let me introduce you to the Double Rocket. Back in June 2014, a new American speedrunner by the name of April would start learning Super Mario 63. April would start out with any percent, but would quickly switch to 100%. Occasionally, April would do an any percent run or two for fun, but wasn't going for world record. Early that November, April started up a stream of messing around in Super Mario 63, until getting the idea to try and get up to the door that leads to Huge Room 1 without going through the turbo room. It was already known at the time that by precisely backflipping with Luigi, you could rocket twice in the air, giving you enough height to reach the platform above. However, using Mario, this method didn't seem to work, so April set out to find something else. After many methods being ruled out, April tried to see if pausing would make the trick work, and unexpectedly, after dozens of attempts, this happened. All you need to do is stand on the ground, start charging a rocket, and pause on the same frame that the rocket blasts off. Just like that, you will be able to rocket a second time in the air and enter Huge Room 1 early. Now, you may wonder why it works like that. The reason for it is because there is a flaw in the game's code that makes animations start progressing one frame earlier than the actual physics. By pausing on the first frame that the rocket animation starts, the game thinks that you already used a rocket. But because you're still on the ground, your flood energy is immediately refilled, which allows for a second rocket right after. This was the first truly game-breaking glitch ever discovered, as it could be used literally anywhere, granted you had the rocket nozzle. And by skipping the turbo room, it saved over 30 seconds. With this discovery, Sekanor would immediately get a new world record of 9:06 on November 7th. He actually completed Tutorial 2 in this run, as with the discovery of Double Rocket, it was believed that this route was now faster than T2 Skip. You can see that he's comparing it against a 907 run, which was apparently the world record. But he never submitted it anywhere, so we're going to compare it to his 954 instead. On top of the double rocket, he also used turbo nozzle in the first room of Bowser 3 instead of rocket. In Huge Room 1, Secondor picked up the invincibility star and used it to stay in lava without taking damage, a strategy still used in runs today. In Huge Room 2, he used turbo through the zigzag section instead of hover, which is trickier but saves a little bit of time. You can see on the splits that this run actually had sub-9 potential going into space, with the best possible time showing an 8:56. But he lost a bit of time in space itself, and some more time in escape, causing it to slip down to a 9:06. All in all, it was a pretty good run, but Secondor didn't seem satisfied. As the description states, sub-9 soon. And sure enough, Secondor would deliver 3 months later, in February of 2015, when he set a new world record of 8:53. He fell a little bit behind his PB exiting Bowser 1. However, he would save a lot of time in Tutorial 2 from cleaning up the mistakes from the previous run, and entering Bowser 3, he was 5 seconds ahead. The fight with fake Bowser featured a trick known as cutscene skip. This trick was already known about, but was never seriously attempted in runs. After stomping on Bowser for the 3rd time, a trigger spawns on the ground that, if Mario touches, he stays in place and cannot move, thus having to go through the entire cutscene. However, if Mario stays in the air for long enough, he can avoid touching the ground and leave the room as soon as the Sling Star spawns, skipping some of the dialogue. Space went mostly the same as in his last run. However, in Escape, he managed to clean up the mistakes he had, thus awarding him the first sub-9 minute run. After this record, he would move on to no major skips and then take another break, and with him, the entire community. It really seemed like it was a one-man show at the world record level for any percent. Of the past 12 records set, only one of them was set by a runner that wasn't Secondor. He was on top of the any percent scene for over a full year. While this was happening, April decided to submit Super Mario 63 to speedrun.com in order to keep better track of the runs. For the past 5 years, runs were being submitted through Google Documents, and the world records would occasionally be posted on Speed Demo's archive. But once the website started to die off, they decided to switch to speedrun.com. History would repeat itself again in late July, when Secondor would set another very important world record, getting an 8:52 on the 28th of July. Why was it so important, you ask? Well, remember how in T2 Skip, players would do 4 deaths at the beginning of Bowser 1, then defeat Bowser and pick up the key to die one more time in Tutorial 2? Well, April once again changed everything when she found this. That's right. By diving and frame perfectly pausing, it's possible to then unpause and grab the key without leaving the stage. It turns out that going to Tutorial 2 was never a requirement to unlock nozzles either, as the game gives you access to them as soon as you touch the key. This was a big new discovery, which now made the T2 skip route faster than Tutorial 2, saving about 10 seconds, and would become the meta for world record runs again. The following day, on the 29th, he would lower his world record twice, first to an 8:48, and then to an 8:43. Having broken the record 3 times in 2 days, Secondor felt safe at the top. Things were seeming stiff for competition at the world record level. Secondor, who stood uncontested as he got world record after world record, would find himself alone, in a position he had owned and very rarely gave up to another. There were evidently other runners in the category, but it almost seems like none were giving Secondor a run for his money. Would Secondor truly remain as the only world record level speedrunner SM63 will ever see? In speedrunning history, it is often seen that Asians had some sort of gift. There was rarely a popular game that a Japanese or other Eastern speedrunner has not held a world record in at some point. Games like Super Mario 64 and Sunshine, both of which SM63 was inspired by, followed this trend. As it turns out, gameplay features were not the only thing SM63 would get out of these 2 games. I Have Luigi 7826, or IHL for short, is a South Korean speedrunner who made his speedrunning debut in Super Mario 63 with a time of 9:35 in any percent, which is an extremely good time for a first run even in today's age. As Secondor uploaded and verified his 8:43, He noticed how fast this new speedrunner was improving, as the same day the 843 was posted, IHL had acquired an 859, making him the third ever person to break the 9-minute barrier. This worried the uncontested world record holder, but it also made him double down on his attempts for sub 840. It only took the Korean runner 2 weeks to lower his time down to an 849, exceedingly close to defeating Sekanor for the first time in over a year. While Sekanor only used this as motivation to continue attempting to break the next 10-second barrier, no one saw what was coming the next day. Key cancel using a dash instead of a dive recover, going through this passage to reach rocket and turbo faster, rocketing in the outside section, rocket storage, a new strategy that allows a rocket to be frozen in time and used later by charging it up and switching off of rocket flood, snappy movement in the bullet bill maze, skipping the first sling star in Space 1 by using a delayed hover, and skipping even more of Space 1 by jumping off of bullet bills. The run clocked in at 8:33, 10 seconds faster than the previous world record, and the biggest world record improvement since September of that year. IHL showed the community that there were still many strats that they have yet to incorporate. Even though this was a huge world record, Sekanor wasn't too scared. In terms of movement, he was still the better player. Around this time, he was on a vacation to America, which meant he wasn't doing many runs. One day, his train was running late by several hours, so to pass the time, he took out his laptop to do some any% attempts. And sure enough, he beat IHL with an 830. In the next few days, he improved the record 2 more times, ending the spree with an 816. It's almost like Sekanor wasn't allowed to not have the record at this point. And despite IHL's attempts to take his record back, Sekanor's record stood on top for several months. One day in December 2015, he lowered his record even further, this time to an 811. However, only 6 days later, IHL did something that no one in the community had done before. On the 25th of December, he gave Sekanor a Christmas present by beating him for a second time, getting an 809. And instead of it staying as the world record for 6 days, this time it stood for nearly 2 months. Someone in the community was finally able to keep up with Sekanor. He would move on to no major skips, battling with Sekanor again for the record. But at the start of 2016, he would come back to any%. And on February 6th, IHL would improve his own world record, this time to an 806. At this point, it seemed more and more like the next minute barrier might just be possible. And sure enough, 2 days later, Sekanor fired back with a time of 752, followed by another record of 747 1 week later. However, the time save came from an unusual source. Turns out, everyone had been playing a version of the game that runs at 30 frames per second, but after the 806, players discovered a different version that runs at 32 frames per second, giving Sekanor the breakthrough needed for the first sub 8.
After these runs, things settled down in the any% category. But the community wasn't dormant. In fact, it was more active than it had ever been. It was an exciting time in the community, as the speedrun.com page helped get new runners into learning the game. Around this time, April suggested switching from their Skype group to a Discord server instead. So the Super Mario 63 Discord server was born. Now it was way easier for the members to communicate with one another, discussing strategies, and talking about the game as a whole. The Discord server greatly helped with growing the community and making it a better place. After lowering the record at no major skips on May 31st, Sekanor would switch back to any%, and on the same day, he would break the science by lowering the world record by 3 seconds. The only notable difference in this run versus the 747 was the new setup that was done for key skip, discovered by April. Instead of staying away from the key and then diving and pausing, Sekanor would now stand right under where the key would spawn, then buffer or pause during the death animation, unpause, and do a backflip. This would be the first instance of this key skip setup being used, which would make the trick a lot more consistent. A setup that is still used to this day. This run had a great Bowser's Castle split, but unfortunately lost some time in space, making it slip to a 744. Sekanor was not yet happy with this run, as he thought the endgame was still quite slow. So he kept grinding, and sure enough, just a couple days later he would get a new record. But before we take a look at it, let's first take a step back. Have you noticed how, all this time, each and every record has had something go wrong somewhere? A few seconds lost here, another few lost there. A lot of this was because of escape. The fact that you had no floods there made escape both the hardest and most punishing section in the entire run. Indeed, every single record we've covered so far lost multiple seconds in escape. Having it at the very end is just brutal. All of this gave escape a bit of a wildcard reputation. It could bring back runs that had no business beating your PB, or it could take a great pace and crush it to pieces. It's not over until you enter that final Sling Star. That is most likely how Secondar felt during this run too. Gold Split Tutorial 1? Yeah, that's impressive, sure. A huge rebound so quick that the Invincibility Star lasts him into the second room? There's a reason he's the best. By the time he finished True Bowser, he had built a nearly 4-second lead, but ultimately, his entire lead meant nothing unless escape let him pass. 7 seconds saved. 7:33. This was the greatest escape segment Secondar had ever done, by 5 seconds. Secondar, shaken by his performance at the end of this run, paused the game right after ending the timer. He had this to say about the run. Sub 740 is surely possible, but I'm letting that to someone else. I'm probably done with this category. Wait, sub 740? Didn't he already beat that? Well, this is a good opportunity to explain a small change the speedrun went through. As was said at the start of the video, the timing begins by pressing Z at the first sign and ends at the final Sling Star of escape. This worked for a while until the community discovered that you can preserve floods through a new file in Tutorial 1 via the level designer, which can be accessed before even creating a file. So now there are two paths forward. They either banned this glitch in runs and kept the old timing, or they changed the timing rule set and allowed the trick. Given that the trick was not revolutionary, they decided to simply allow it and alter the timing method a little as a result. The new timing went as so. The run began after pressing start and ended at the first frame of the transition out of Escape 3. This is the timing scheme that has continued until today. Confused? Let's take this next world record for example. A month after Secondar's legendary 7:33, IHL barely managed to beat the run by 1 second, scoring himself a 7:32 on the 27th of July. This run is the final run that used the old timing method that we described at the beginning. Now if you check the speedrun.com page for this run, you'll notice that it says 7:41. This discrepancy comes from the timing change that we just discussed earlier. While IHL had begun his timer after pressing Z at the first sign, the new timing scheme began to run directly after the start button was pressed. This also means that Secondar's 7:33 was actually a 7:42 all along. From this run forward, all the world records will be timed using the new timing method. Following this run, the 90% category would enter yet another period of inactivity at the top level. However, new runners were actively doing attempts trying to improve their times. In the middle of September, April got scarily close to the world record when she set a new personal best of 7:46. This was the first run to use the level designer to get floods in Tutorial 1, and despite it only saving 2 seconds, April was able to refine her movement to a top level. Being only 5 seconds behind the record now, she felt like she could finally claim her first world record in 90%, but unfortunately, she would take a break from the game. It wouldn't be until early November that she would PB again, this time getting a 7:44, inching ever so closer to the world record. After that, came another period of activity from April. However, when she came back a month later, she would accidentally stumble upon one of the greatest discoveries in the game's history. On the evening of December 24th, April will complete her first major skips run and post about it in the Discord server. Not long after this run, she started a 100% fall this run, just for fun. She was playing on the original 2009 release of the game this time around as she wanted to do slide skip, a trick that was patched in the 2012 version, which was the main version that was used for speedruns since it was the most recent one. As you may have already guessed, the flawless category forbids the usage of floods altogether. The run went as expected up until Space 2. Near the end of the room, she panicked and accidentally pressed shift, but instead of switching to no nozzle as expected, this happened.
Wait, what?
She switched to turbo instead. Turns out the key to obtaining floods in space was hiding in plain sight all along, as if you played on the 2009 version, all you needed was a single shift press. And to add to the madness that had taken place, this also worked in Escape. This was one of the biggest discoveries ever made in Super Mario 63 as a whole, and it took the community by storm. The amount of potential it had to save time in every category was mental, Immediately after finishing the Floodless run, April would start another streak, and just a few minutes in, April claimed the record by getting a 7:35. This would be April's first world record in any percent ever since the start of her journey all the way back in 2014. But even though it was a new record by 7 seconds, it definitely wasn't the cleanest run. It had a few mistakes and less than optimal movement throughout, but also featured many new strats. With the revolutions made to Space and Escape, runners found many more uses for the double rocket. Like here, in Bowser's Castle, people discovered that you could double rocket right after exiting Huge Room 2 and reach the fake Bowser door much quicker. Space 2 and Space 3 also each had a double rocket to blast through the rooms. In Escape 1, April used the turbo nozzle and got hit by an enemy to damage those through the fire bars. Escape 2 was pretty floppy, and she took damage at the end of Escape 3. The time save of having floods still allowed for a 7:35 world record. This just showed the community how much potential floods in Space and Escape had, and not just in terms of time save. It made the category way more enjoyable to run by revolutionizing the two most punishing and least consistent parts of the run. Sub 720 was already considered to be a real possibility now, but only a few hours later, Secondor would submit this run to the leaderboards. Most of the time save came from getting a really good Bowser's Castle split, where he would save 11 seconds. He then went on to Gold Space, but unfortunately he lost some time due to a sloppy escape. Still, he managed to finish the run 10 seconds faster than April, and thus he closed off the year with a new record of 7:25. The beginning in 2017 would consist of a constant exchange of world records. First, Secondor lowered the record to 7:22, only 3 days into the new year, but 18 days later, Aisha would strike back at Secondor with a 7:20. Secondor was still doing attempts, however, and on February 3rd he would lower it again, this time to a 7:14, mainly thanks to a cleaner escape. Aisha would quickly respond 10 days later when he would improve the record by 1 second, and his 7:13 would calm the scene for a little while. While all of this was happening, a new South Korean runner named Maju would start learning how to speedrun Super Mario 63. His first submitted any percent run was an 8:50, a solid time for an upcoming runner, but he wouldn't stick to any percent, as he constantly switched between the 3 main categories. While Maju was improving in the background in every category, on the 19th of April, Secondor responded by getting a new world record of 7:10. There was no clear reason why, but this run would be his most viewed run ever. People were in awe of his skill, and it was now clear that sub 7:10 would be achieved in the future. It was only a matter of who and when. The bigger question that started to rise around this time was, could Super Mario 63 be beaten in less than 7 minutes? While players generally agreed that a segmented run could potentially get a time as low as sub 650, for full game runs, it looked like sub 7 was just barely out of reach with the current strats. However, this wouldn't stop runners from trying to get closer to this huge milestone. So far, the year was going great. There had already been 5 world records set since the start of 2017, and through the combined efforts of IHL and Secondor, the world record would go down by 12 seconds. But here's when things started to go on a downward slope. This would be the last record set in any percent in the year of 2017. After his 7:10, Secondor would take a break from the category. He was still running other categories, getting a few records in the process, but his focus was no longer on any percent. Going into the summer of 2018, the 7:10 was still first place on the leaderboards. Finally, 440 days later, on the 3rd of July 2018, Secondor lowered his own record to a 7:08, in the process getting the first sub 7:10 run as well. During this run, something very special happened. Because of a golden space, Secondor's sum best segments dropped to below 7 minutes. This meant it was now theoretically possible to beat the game in real time in under 7 minutes. Obviously, it wouldn't be easy, but it was at least confirmed that sub 7 was within human reach. Secondor then stated that he would go for sub 7 whenever he would get to do more runs of any percent again. But for now, he moved on to other categories for a few weeks, before taking his first major break from the game. He had already taken several breaks before, however those only lasted a few months at most. This time, we wouldn't see another run from Secondor for almost an entire year. Secondor was gone, April was speeding 100%, and Maju was improving his time to attempt to reach the top level. Only one person remained to shatter the sub 7 barrier. IHL. He began strong, setting a new world record of 7:05 on November 5th. IHL himself claimed to have used slow movement, and that time could be saved in quite a few places in his run, such as space. Aside from pumping out world records, IHL proved to be an extremely consistent player, uploading a compilation of many runs in the 7:10 to 7:15 region back to back. He was, without a doubt, the main and most likely contender for this legendary barrier. He never stopped. Only 9 days later, IHL set yet another new world record with a time of 7:04. featuring a brand new strat in Escape 3 known as Sling Star Scope. By doing a double rocket right at the start, it's possible to gain enough speed to reach the transition to the final cutscene while skipping the Sling Star entirely, saving close to 2 seconds. He choked many runs to multiple different areas, the meteors in space, and the advanced movement of Bowser's Castle, but he did not allow this to demotivate him. IHL, who never stopped playing since his debut so many years prior, kept pushing, and pushing, and pushing. Even after claiming that sub-7 might not be possible for him, IHL continued running. He ran until his fingers were too tired to press the shift key, but he simply slept and continued running the next day. The meteors in space were relentless in ending IHL's runs, but his spirit came out on top with a time of 7:02 5 days later. But soon enough, IHL's spirit was completely shattered. He kept losing runs to idiotic mistakes or unavoidable RNG. It was simply too much for him. After the 7:02, IHL simply stopped running any percent. Despite his relentless battle against the game for the sub-7 time, the game simply would not let up. IHL would leave any percent, not to be seen for many, many months to come. This is when the entire community would enter a dark age. All of those new runners picking up the game had by now vanished, and it quickly became a deserted community. Majuk would get a sub-7 10 of his own by the end of November, but that would mark the end of 2018. What was once an active Discord server in 2016 and 2017 now turned into a wasteland by 2018. At this point, it had become a pretty rare occurrence for a single message to be posted in the Discord server, and everyone moved on to other games and projects. 2018 ended, and 2019 began. But unknown to everyone, this would be one of the biggest years for the game's history. Early 2019 can be described as a slow rise in intermediate runners. In January, 2 runners, Potato and Raisin, joined the community and started lowering their times into the low 8-minute range, with Potato managing to eventually break the 8-minute barrier. Then in May, Galumba, who had already tried the game back in late 2018, came back and worked his way into the mid-7 minutes. In June, 2 more runners would enter the scene, Purple Gaze and Narby, who would both achieve times of almost exactly 8 minutes. This steady rise in new activity was about to culminate in something that was unprecedented in this game's history. Summer started off with Secondor returning to any percent after almost a full year break, hoping to get that elusive sub-7. On the 19th of June, he would do his first D-Rush stream, hoping to relearn the game. He would find immediate success as that same day he was able to get a new personal best of 7:06. In description, he states, "Goal is world record, and eventually sub-7 if I'm good enough." And as seen throughout all the years that he's ran the game, getting dozens of world records even while having fierce competition, he made one thing very clear. Secondor never disappoints. On the very next day, both Secondor's and the game's potential will be put on display for the world to see. A new minute barrier had been broken, and Secondor was once again the guy to do it. It had been an incredible journey for Sek. Over the past 5 years, he had broken every single minute barrier the game had to offer, culminating with a 6-minute 58-second time. The community was shocked. What was thought to be impossible a few years ago now became a reality. This was the pinnacle of Super Mario 63 speedruns, and so it stood on top, alone. Despite this, a new minute barrier is not the only accomplishment this run had in store. This world record intensified the game's activity and brought about what is widely regarded as Super Mario 63's golden age. This world record invited speedrunning prodigies and caught the attention of new competitors to fight for the throne and overcome all expectations. This world record would be the catalyst that would turn the any percent category into one of the most optimized categories in all of Flash game speedrunning.
Holy moly, wow.